Have you ever read Genesis 5 or Genesis 11? You know, those chapters that say things like, "Thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years. Thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. Thus all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and he died," and on it goes. A faith and science organization has put out an article called "Why Did People in the Bible Live So Long?" They take a very different view than we do, and we have a few things today to say about it as we bring you a critique of this article by BioLogos. Hello and welcome to the BC Messenger Podcast. We are so glad you're here today. This is Real Science, Real Bible, Real History, and Real World. My name is Steve Hall, and as we are every month, I am with my wife, Jennifer. And Jen, today we begin our 5th season recording podcasts.
Every August, we roll over to a new season in our recording schedule. And sure enough, we are beginning season 5 today. And we thank our audience for joining us. We were talking just a few minutes ago as we were getting prepared to begin recording that we appreciate the unusual people out there who listen to this podcast. Because we know if you are a listener of this podcast, you appreciate new ideas. You are open to considering things that might change up your paradigm a little bit, but you keep listening and you keep hanging with us. And you know, those kind of people in the world are pretty unusual.
Yeah,
so
it's true.
We appreciate every single person in our audience. We appreciate you. And thank you for tuning in here at the start of season 5.
Aw, that was sweet.
Yeah, we have to be a little sentimental.
That's right. You just made me feel so comfortable and glad to be here. So thank you.
Of course.
Well, you're right. I've had conversations with people a lot, and we've talked about this, that many people just aren't open. They don't want to hear, something that's different from what they've always thought and believed, and that's fine. There's a lot of different people in the world, but we do appreciate that you're here and taking in truth and ideas that you're not going to hear anywhere else. If you've been listening any time at all, you have seen that and realized that.
Speaking of being sweet, I do have to say thank you to the listener who sent us a card congratulating us on completing 4 years of podcasting.
Really? I did not know about this.
Well, it was the sweetest. I'm going to have to be sure you see it.
Oh.
I thought you had seen it, but maybe I didn't call your attention to it. But, it's not every day you get a card in the mail, you open it, and confetti falls out, and it says, "Congratulations on 4 years of podcasting."
I'm glad it was confetti and wasn't like some white powder. Remember that years ago? It was like scares. Anyhow.
All right, we got to stay on topic.
Good. Well, very nice. Well, I've often heard, we've done 4 years of podcasting, and I have heard in the past it takes about 5 years to really get into something.
Ooh, we're getting close.
We are almost there. One more year and we've got this thing down.
We are getting close. That's right.
And anyhow, so very good. Well, hey, Jen, give us the rundown of what we're talking about today.
We are digging into our featured topic of a critique of BioLogos article, "Why Did People in the Bible Live So Long?" Then after that, we do have a research update, and please do stay tuned for this. We actually just got done putting hundreds and hundreds of letters in the mail because all of our people need to be aware of this research update because it has to do with the anti-aging vitamins and an exciting change, a good change, but something we want everyone to know about. And so the mailman just came a few minutes ago and picked up about half of those letters out of our giant mailbox. And speaking of being unusual, I'm like, well, we don't want to just be your normal postal customer over here. Our poor mailman. He was a little shocked when he opened the mailbox. But that's what this research update is that we're sharing with you on the podcast today, is the same thing that we have just done this mailing. So we will be sharing that here in a little bit. And then Helen's view. She has written a piece for us today about some recent events over at the Aardsma Research and Publishing campus and some life lessons that she was able to draw out of that. It's called a 1-hour masterpiece. So you'll be hearing that at the end of the podcast. And we are just now going to launch into our critique of BioLogos article on the biblical lifespans. And we are going to examine it from our vantage point here at the Biblical Chronologist and the much groundwork that's been laid here, the work that's been done here. And we're going to kind of contrast these two different approaches that we have here. And we'd like you, our audience, to think through this with us. You're welcome to go open the article by BioLogos. There's a link there in the show notes, and trek with us as we go down through it.
So this is an article by a group called BioLogos. You may or may not be familiar with who they are. You can do your own research and look that up online, Google it. Bio, of course, has to do with biology, I guess, the world.
Life,
right? And then logos, or logos, however you say that, is the word. We call the word of God, the logos.
Cool name. Good job,
Very good
whoever
name.
made
I love
that
it.
name for that group.
So they've been around for a long time and are seeking to bring the word and the world together, faith and science, but definitely approach things in a very different way than we do here at the Biblical Chronologist.
From their website, Faith and Science Together, we help people explore, embody, and delight in the harmony between faith and science so they can draw deeper into love of God and all God has created.
So, again, if you want to do some research of your own on who they are, but today's article, I think, will give a pretty good demonstration as to how they're approaching things, the kind of answers that they're giving, especially to young people who are seeking for answers to bring their faith back along with what they're seeing in the real world. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. But the approach is very different from our approach. So BioLogos recently published an article titled, "Why Did People in the Bible Live So Long?"
Let's just introduce the author of this article quickly. His name is John Walton. John Walton is a senior scholar for biblical studies, and he is an author for BioLogos, and he is on their staff. He is a professor emeritus of Old Testament at Wheaton College here in Illinois, and an editor and writer of Old Testament comparative studies and commentaries.
Right.
So this is the individual who has authored this article, and it just came out June 29th, 2026. So that was less than a month ago, and hence the timeliness of this content for our podcast here, where we regularly talk about aging research, longevity, the super longevity in Genesis. Right. These are all very common topics for us here on the BC Messenger.
Right. And of course, when that title came across our computer screen one day, it grabbed our attention. And so we went and read it. And today we want to go through this article section by section and critique it.
All right. So, title of the article, "Why Did People in the Bible Live So Long?" Then the little summary or subtitle says, "The long lifespans recorded in Genesis likely reflect how ancient peoples used genealogies rhetorically, not how long people actually lived." So then you get a little clue there that, okay, we're not going to get an answer to the why question. We're going to be told, oh, trick question, they didn't actually, this is rhetorical. Okay.
Right.
And that's right there at the top. So that's no spoiler. That's just what you see as you start reading the article. Now, what do we mean rhetorically? I looked up that word. Rhetorically means using language for style, effect, or persuasion rather than to convey literal information. Okay. Rhetorical. So it's just like for effect. It's for style. One of our daughters was just in a talent show, and she and her friend sang a song, "A Million Dreams for the World We're Gonna Make." Is that song literally saying, I have a million dreams? No, it's, I guess, sort of in this sense, it's being used for style, effect, a figure of speech, or just something not literal, okay? So that's what this article is saying here at the very beginning. So the question being asked is kind of shortchanged right there at the start. But anyways, let's get into the content of the article. I got my papers here, so I can only do so much digitally, and I got to have my highlighter, and I got to have my papers and my books and all that. Okay, so here we go. When we read the book of Genesis, we encounter many statements that surprise us. One area that astounds many modern readers is the ages of individuals described. He tells the age of Abraham. He lived 175 years. Isaac, 180. He gives references. Jacob, 147. Even Joseph, 110. And Moses, 120 seem exceptional. All of these pale in comparison, however, to the genealogy found in Genesis 5. I think you referenced at the beginning of the program. Right. Genesis 5 and Genesis 11 is where the Bible is giving us these specific numerically tied genealogies.
Right. Okay. We don't think much about Jacob and Joseph and Abraham and Moses because that seems, like he said, pales in comparison to these others. But their ages were very much different from ours. 147, 175, 120, very exceptional. But when we get into Genesis 5.
Adam, 930, Seth, 912, Enosh, 905, Kenan, 910, Mahalalel, 895, Jared, 962, Enoch, 365. We know because the Bible says something special happened to him and he was taken up, walked with God, and God took him. Methuselah, 969.
Longest one recorded?
Methuselah. Everybody knows, right?
Everybody knows Methuselah.
And then Lamech is also given an age there in Genesis 5, 777. And then we are introduced to Noah in that chapter, but it does not tell his age in that chapter. So that's interesting.
So again, the title of the article, why did people in the Bible live so long?
Right.
Well, we're not really, as we're going to see, we're not going to get that answer, as you already mentioned.
But here's the conclusion of this first section of the article. If that were not shocking enough, when we look carefully, we see that several of these people are said to have been over 100 years old when they fathered the next in line.
Right.
These amazing lifespans invite several possible explanations, he
Definitely
says.
Surprising to us.
Yes, we really want to agree on this first point. We agree. This is exceptional, astounding, shocking, and amazing.
So then the author goes into possible explanations, right?
Yes. So here we go with the next section, potential explanations for long biblical lifespans. He has here 4 different potential explanations with just a sentence or 2 for each. Now, I do need to mention a lot of his information here is footnoted, and you can go and read other related articles and other things where he's drawing some of his content from. Okay, the first possible explanation, potential explanation, the lifespans are accurate. The lifespans reflect actual or extraordinarily long lives. He says...
That's one option.
This is the first
That's
option,
not what he's saying.
A potential explanation. So that would be that they're accurate. Then he says, this seems surprising due to our current understanding of human aging. Now, I do have to stop right there. He says this would be surprising due to our current understanding of human aging. I'm not sure what he means there because human aging is not understood. Now, if he just means our current experience, definitely is surprising in light of our current experience. But I think we all know that just because something is a certain way now does not mean it's always been that way.
Right.
So he seems to be saying our current understanding, I don't know if he means scientifically, that he thinks that aging is understood in some way that
humans
means
have
that it's impossible to live that long. So he dismisses that on that basis. It would be surprising due to our current understanding of human aging. However, he puts a little note in here. Some feel this could be a result of mortality taking hold gradually, based on the idea that people in the beginning were created immortal.
So we're kind of out of the science realm now, and we're into the spiritual realm, miracle world. Right. Created immortal.
Something supernatural was going on.
Right.
Of course, we have pointed out here that the lifespan data and the curve, and when you model it, when you graph it, just a simple graph, does not at all look like something that you would expect if it was supernatural, because it has all the marks of some kind of a natural process going on.
Right.
Steady state all the way up to Noah's flood, and then a decline.
So what's not here is, he's giving credence to the option that the lifespans are accurate, but what we don't have is any kind of understanding from the start that we might be looking at real human aging, the only window in the entire universe that we have in the real world of people living these ages. If this is true, it must be supernatural.
Right. That's the only real way that he says that they could have, that maybe they were living that long if it was miraculous or some kind of shadow of immortality or something.
Right.
So because we've never seen it, doesn't mean it's not possible. We do have to remind ourselves of that here.
It might be surprising,
on the podcast.
as he says. But
definitely surprising, amazing,
right.
astounding, but
not impossible.
That's not a good way to falsify it, especially when we trust the record the Bible is giving us.
Well, that's where we get to some questions, don't we? What do we trust? Okay,
let's keep going.
Carry on.
Next potential explanation. The lifespans are fanciful. He says this is a possible explanation. The account is fanciful and not to be believed. This is not a ready option for those of us who hold the Bible in high esteem, he says.
Okay.
So the author is placing himself in the category of holding the Bible in high esteem, and therefore we cannot just dismiss it as made up or not to be believed. That's what he says. 2 sentences. So
right.
He doesn't feel that that's an option. Third option, the lifespans use a different number system. And this is the lifespans were tallied using a different number system, or they count months rather than years. Such explanations do not align with the data. And he has a footnote there. All evidence confirms that from the earliest writing and throughout Semitic populations, a base 10 system was used. So he's like saying, did they have some other weird way of counting that is messing it up for us in our, numbers that we use today? He doesn't think so, because he also says the only exception is the Sumerian sexagesimal system, a combined base 10 and base 6 system, which would not offer a solution to understanding the Genesis genealogies. So he moves on from a different number system. Then he says...
So we've had possible that the lifespans are accurate, the possibility that the lifespans are fanciful, possibility that the lifespans use some sort of different number system. All right, and then he gives one more.
Fourth option, the lifespans are rhetorical. Rather than being actual counts, the lifespans reflect a rhetorical approach to the data. Now, we already read the subtitle at the beginning there, and so we kind of know that that is the direction that he's going in this article.
Right.
He then says, to determine which of these explanations is appropriate, we should consider how genealogies were used both in the Bible and across the ancient Near East.
Now, let's pause here for a second and remind everyone that this individual, John Walton, is not a scientist. He is a theologian. So he is not in any way looking at this topic through the lens of scientific research. He is looking at it through theology and trying to figure out how can we best what is the best course of action here to determine what these ancient writers would have meant by putting these fantastical numbers down, these ages.
Right. And I think you've said to me several times as we've prepared this podcast that we here at the Biblical Chronologist, where we do nothing but work with this information as real world information, we need to remember that many Christians have never even considered,
right,
in modern times, have never even considered that this could be literal information. And so we're kind of waving a red flag over here, like just trying to plant the seed and put the idea out there that, in fact, to find out what these numbers really mean, all you got to do is look at the numbers.
Right. And I'll go further to say that very, very often, and again, I don't care what side of the so-called aisle that you're on, it can very often be misleading to present yourself and your ministry and your group as science. We're out here doing creation science, for instance. We're over here doing Bible science, and in reality, there's not much science going on at all. To actually look at lifespans like this, as Dr. Aardsma has done, for most people, and I don't want to put words in, is Mr. Walton a doctor? I don't know.
It does not say.
It doesn't say.
But
Okay.
I assume he is.
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I highly doubt that it's on his or anybody's radar at BioLogos very much that we need to look at the data here. We need to see the science behind why these people live this long. That's just not on their radar.
But it should be, and it needs to be.
That's right.
And so we're
and that's
working
what we're trying
our way
to present.
there. Correct. So he very quickly in the article says we need to consider genealogies, how they were used both in the Bible and across the ancient Near East.
So that's the angle he's going to come at it with. Let's compare what we find in this ancient literature of the Bible with other ancient literature.
Right. This is going to help us determine which explanation is appropriate, he says. Then he has a new section. Does the Bible explain why people lived so long? Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Oh,
if
yeah.
the Bible said, and the reason for the pre-flood longevity is or was, and gives us a solution or some kind of an outline as to why it was. But no, as John Walton says, no, the Bible offers no direct explanations for why people lived so long. Our only recourse is to try to carefully consider what viable options exist. Okay, yes, I agree with this. This is one point I strongly agree with. We must consider what options exist in finding out an explanation, in elucidating, what was going on here. Because this is a question of enormous importance today.
Right.
Now, if it's not even on your radar that this could possibly be real numbers, then I guess you don't feel the weight of investigating it at that level. But hopefully, as we continue to raise awareness here, that in fact you can work with these numbers and do rigorous science with them, then hopefully people will be more and more awakened to the fact that no, we shouldn't just move off of that option onto another one before we have thoroughly investigated the question of looking at it from a literal, real standpoint. So yes, we do need to carefully consider what viable options exist for getting to the bottom of this, because not just so that we can say, oh, now we know the reason, but obviously once you know the reason, then you extrapolate that out to 2026 and people dying of aging and suffering all around us in our world. And could there possibly be something that could be done?
And again, this is not on anybody's radar. That, the Bible is, if it's going to help us today, it's going to help us in theological terms. And that's true. It's going to help us with our souls. It's going to help us to have a more moral society. It's going to help us understand God. Yes, yes, yes. But it's not on anybody's radar that the data given to us in these ancient documents might actually give us important and vital information about our world today, the science of our world, the things we're trying to discover. God might have left them there for us in all these years so that we could find them. Now, I think we need to mention this because the problem that we're having here, we all understand there are things in the Bible that are not taken literally. We all understand that there are things in the Bible that nobody would say, well, that's to be taken. The woman standing on the moon with 12 stars over her head, right?
In the book of Revelation.
Right. Dragons coming up out of the sea, mountains, God flying over them and they melt.
Even in the Old Testament,
yeah.
Some of the books talking about nations being judged and stars falling and very cataclysmic things happening that we may not read in the most literal sense.
So how do we understand this? Well, we have to understand how to read our Bibles properly. There's different books of the Bible with different types of literature. And some of that literature is prophetic language, what some call apocalyptic language, and the people who wrote it and the people who were reading it completely understood that. It was not to be taken literally. It meant something was meant behind it. But not the book of Genesis, not books like Genesis and Exodus, right? And the book of Joshua and all these are, and they were written to be historical accounts. You and I tapped into a discussion with a group of scientists and science-leaning people. I don't know how to word that, but anyhow, and there was a very famous and well-known
apologist,
theologian talking to these scientists. And they were talking about this thing of Genesis, that you can't really see Genesis as historical narrative
1 through 11
until
Genesis,
you get to chapter 11.
No, 12.
Or 12, right.
12.
Till you get past 11.
Mm-hmm.
And they took our question. We asked a question.
Yes, we raised our hand in the digital group.
In the digital world, and got in, and we asked them, is this something that a lot of people believe? Is this something that, that is just known?
I think our question was, why a dividing line at Genesis between 11 and 12?
Yeah.
What would make that first part of Genesis be separated from the rest?
And really the only answer we were given was, well, yeah, of course, everybody believes that. Everybody knows that.
Very widely accepted by all scholars.
Okay, so that's the problem that we're having here. Well, who said that? And where do you draw that line? So part of this is not to be taken literally. Part of it is just rhetorical, as our author here is using. But then all of a sudden we come in onto historical narrative. Well, that just doesn't jive.
Well, it doesn't sit well to start with, but then if you are a chronologist like Dr. Aardsma, you can test the information in Genesis 1 through 11 with some real-world tests. You can assign some dates for things like Noah's flood, and then you can go testing that.
Right.
You can test the chronological information that's given with the lifespan numbers. And so, yes, I mean, if it is just somehow all not to be taken literally, then those tests are going to fail.
Right.
But in fact, you can investigate to your heart's content the many tests that have been done, the many lines of research back in Genesis 1 through 11 that Dr. Aardsma has done.
And how he got there.
It succeeds every time.
Exactly.
So at that point, you can't really say that we're in the some kind of special realm, Genesis 1 to 11. Then when we get to 12, okay, we got guys like Abraham coming on the scene here, and then we start to really see this as more of like actual history.
Right.
So anyways, yeah, that was a deviation off of the article here.
Right.
But that's all important information to know. But all those comments aside, he does say our only recourse is to consider carefully what viable options exist. Very next sentence. Our most promising course of action then is to investigate genealogical traditions as they were understood and used in the ancient world. That way we may be able to better understand the long lifespans recorded in Genesis 5. Now, I don't know why he feels that's the most promising course of action. I mean, that is a course of action, but it does seem that that's kind of a leap to me.
It may go back to our other podcast we did when we talked about when ancient things were written, ancient law codes, ancient writings that we have. Many people believe that the Bible accounts, Genesis, was written after a lot of these other ancient documents were written. And so therefore, we are just kind of doing in the Bible what everybody else did in ancient literature, not understanding that when you get the chronology right, the Bible is set apart and comes before all of this other ancient literature.
Yes, we did the law of Moses being a copy and all that of other law codes. And of course, it's not. It was setting a precedent in its time. Yes, for sure on that. And what he wants to do is try to find out like what this other ancient literature is happening to do with their genealogies. Maybe that'll shed some light on some things, he says. But we can just interject here. He may say it later. The other ancient genealogies do not have any lifespan data.
Right.
So it certainly doesn't help us to know anything additional about ancient lifespans. The closest you can get is the Sumerian king list, which gives lengths of reigns.
Lengths of reigns, right.
And I had a very interesting chat with Dr. Ardsma about that because that list has them reigning for like tens of thousands of years or something. Right. And he said that there was some work done a few decades ago now that was showing that the Sumerian king list was very likely done in the sexagesimal system to start with, and then was wrongly put into the other base 10 numbering system, and it messed the numbers all up.
Okay.
And so that's very interesting. Anyway, let's just carry on. We could sit here and chat all day.
But we got the point. He's pointing to other ancient documents and saying that this is our most promising course of action. How were those understood? That'll help us to understand the Bible.
In doing so, we need to be mindful of the fact, our author says, that we are studying ancient history. We cannot assume that genealogies had the same purpose then as they do now, or that the same conventions were used. Now, genealogies in the Bible, I learned this studying this for the podcast, that they do serve different purposes. You have some that are showing a royal line. You have some that are showing the line of the priesthood. You have some that are showing the development of different nations or different trades or culture through the genealogy. But then you have these very special genealogies with numbers associated with them, very specifically, intervals of time. And so in that case, you have to ask the question, what is this for? This isn't about a kingly line or development of culture. This seems to be about numbers. So I don't disagree with the author that not all ancient genealogies were used for the same purpose, but we're specifically honed in on this issue of these numerically based genealogies.
Well, not only that, but in studying for this podcast again, realizing that there's none out there in ancient documentation nearly as complete and as detailed as that is contained in Genesis.
Yes, that leads me right into the author's next statement, and we agree with him again. First, it must be acknowledged that even though a few royal and priestly genealogies exist in ancient Near Eastern documents, nothing equivalent to Genesis 5 in form or structure is extant. So, and then he says, most importantly, we have no genealogies that include lifespans, let alone long lifespans. So it's kind of a shame, to take the most complete, the most detailed, and then subject it to trying to figure it out based on stuff that's of lesser import. But that's what we're doing.
Well, let me interject something here too, because I think everybody understands this, that these particular folks, in their defense of the scriptures, they don't really believe the events that we find in Genesis ever actually happened. For instance, the flood. They don't really believe that it ever was a real flood, or if it was a local flood. They don't really believe in the exact account of creation. They believe in God, they believe in the Bible, but not really in these accounts at all. So they're trying to give some kind of an answer as to why God would have had the writers write in this way. Okay, of course, we take a very different approach from all of that. We believe that, no, this literally is what happened. It's what God put into the historical record, and he put it there for very good reason.
Yes.
And again, studying Dr. Arzma's research, and I hope people like John Walton will do that if they haven't heard of it yet and they don't know about it, but to realize that, go back to the missing millennium, when you get the chronology right, now we can find it. Because, people like John Walton have got good reason, or others, to not really take these things literally. They can't find it in real world history. Well, now we can. Now we do know where it is. Now we do know what these things were like. And now we can go back and say, okay, wait a minute. Maybe these ages, maybe these lifespans really were a true documentation of how long people were living. And lo and behold, Dr. Arzma's done the work. You can go research it, you can go find it, and we have very good reason to believe that it's very real.
In the interest of getting through the rest of this article more quickly, of course, our listeners are welcome to go read the whole thing and look at the footnotes and everything. I'm going to give a bullet point approach here to get through the content about the ancient genealogies. He says that the characteristics of these ancient genealogies, in which he includes Genesis. So here's some bullet points. He's including Genesis in the list of the ancient genealogies that he's going to use to help know how to interpret Genesis. Long lives in a primeval period that gradually reduce over time, fluidity in the order of ancestors, omitting some generations to fit a pattern, and the rhetorical use of numbers and inclination towards certain types of numbers that were considered meaningful, such as 3, 7, 10, and 12. It's not hard at all to realize that the number, this is me talking from the biblical chronologist content, that the lifespan numbers were rounded a little bit to indicate, maybe 5 years or 10 years of uncertainty in what they were able to calculate about Mahalalel living, 895 years or whatever it was. They may have had a little bit of uncertainty there. And so there was some rounding, but we don't have to get all schematic about it, because you can very easily get over into numerology, where everything just becomes a big scheme of numbers. And, maybe it was the square of this times this, and then, a square of another thing over here.
What hidden message is in there in the numbers that we can decode? Right.
So these 4 characteristics that I listed there, he goes into each one and says things, like maybe they were trying to point out the utopian nature of the time that they lived in by saying everything was so fantastically long-lived. Fluidity, in the order of ancestors, he references some very ancient writings with that. And then omitting some generations, telescoping. And yes, we know that is done in certain genealogies. But again, we're focused on some genealogies here that are very, very numerically oriented, very different from a telescoped genealogy. Right. And then, of course, the rhetorical use of numbers, which I just talked about. He brings that up. He also references another article, it's a BioLogos article from maybe 6 or some years ago. And yes, a lot of numerology in there when it comes to these ancient lifespans.
He makes the statement, another author has suggested, that one interpretive adjustment we need to make is to think about numbers in the genealogies, not on the basis of what they mean, their numerical value, for instance, but how they mean, their rhetorical use, that they're communicating ideas figuratively, right, not literally. So, yeah, you can get into some really strange stuff when you're talking about numbers and what it's meant, not just looking at it for face value.
I have some quotes from that individual's article from 2017, Daniel Lowry. Here's the kind of thing that he says as he's trying to go into, what hidden numerical codes could have been in these ancient lifespans. Let's not just read it and believe that they actually lived these ages, let's try to find a hidden code, a hidden meaning that'll tell us something about the ancient past or how these people thought about things. But here's the words from this 2017 article. The truth is, we don't really know what it meant to the ancients to attribute these numbers to the lives of the patriarchs. Another part of the article, we may never know for sure what significance the numbers had for the ancient Hebrews who wrote the text. Knowing what we do about the culture, and in the absence of any persuasive reasons for thinking that the ages of these men were so radically different than they are today, I need to communicate with this Daniel Lowry and give him a few persuasive reasons. It seems that a symbolic or rhetorical interpretation is a legitimate option, maybe even a preferable one. And then another statement. This one will lead you in some places. If we never know for sure how genres worked in the ancient world or how long the patriarchs actually lived, we know enough to understand what God expects us to take from the text. All right, we won't get into all that right at this moment, but that is a big footnoted article that is playing a big role in what John Walton is communicating here. Okay, and so then we get to the conclusion here, and we will go back to reading it.
And while the Genesis information might be surprising to people who go and read it based on our experience, the conclusion of the article is not surprising as we come to the end of this article.
Right. Let's listen to the conclusion. Genesis long lifespans are probably not literal ages. Given the evidence above... So evidence is a pretty strong word, I would say, just giving some generalities about some other ancient genealogies. Given the evidence above, we can consider it unlikely that the ages given in the genealogies of Genesis reflect the actual lifespans of individuals. Okay, now here is really where I just land. We can consider it unlikely. Then he follows that sentence by saying, we therefore do not have to find an explanation for why they lived so long. They didn't.
There you go.
Okay, so we went from it's unlikely to they didn't. And if we're just going to stop on unlikely for a minute, as I mentioned earlier, in this type of a pursuit, you cannot dismiss it until you have exhausted every possibility. It's just too important. You cannot say it's pretty unlikely, so I'm just going to gloss over it. Somebody has got to try to do some science with this information.
So explain why you say it's just too important. Because I'm going back in my mind to what we said a little bit ago. This isn't even on their radar. Why would you say this is just too important? Because we're trying to get past it, Jennifer. We're trying to get this under the rug as fast as we can to save God, to save face here, to save the Bible.
Yeah, it seems
because
that...
because we don't have to find an explanation for why they live so long. That's the sum up right there. That's what's so important to the theologian here. That we don't have to. The Bible's trustworthiness is based on the claims that it's making. Oh my goodness. The Bible's making these claims, and these poor young people are having to figure out, these crazy ages in the Bible. So that's what's important, isn't it? What do you mean it's just too important to dismiss these genealogies?
Well, here's what I mean. One time we had a conversation with someone about something important, and they kept saying, well, what if it's not true? What if it's not true? And I believe the question was able to be flipped around. What if it is true?
Right.
What if it is true?
What if it is true?
So John Walton may be thinking, oh my goodness, what if this isn't true? And, this really looks foolish. This is supposed to be our holy book. And right at the beginning, it just looks utterly foolish to be saying people could live this long. And so what if this isn't actually true information? What can we do? Like you're saying, how can we help
God out?
How can we help
the Bible out?
But John Walton and others like him would do well to consider, just for a moment, entertain the thought, or for a few moments, what if it is true?
Right.
What if it is? And that it was not some kind of lingering immortality or something miraculous,
Or
but it
a
was
code
something
hidden in the numbers. What if the numbers mean exactly what they say?
Right. What if saying we may never know for sure what significance the numbers had is really a silly thing to say, because all you got to do is read it and you'll know what significance it has? What if? Just what if? Where would that lead you? Where would that train of thought take you? Could somebody do science with this? Could this information be found to bear out in the real world? And why would we care? Because if so, we certainly don't want to let people keep dying at age 75 and 80.
Because what you're saying is, if we have ancient information, if we have a window in this world of people who lived these kind of ages, and we have accounts, historical accounts of the record of their genealogy and their ages gradually decreasing, and we have an account of an event that took place in the world, and they suddenly stopped living these ages, could science be done to show us in research why they lived these ages, how it was going about, and could it be brought back to us today?
Right.
And
it
in
is
a very
not
physical benefit to humanity.
correct. A very practical way.
Right.
What if that was even a remote possibility? How could you dismiss such a thing until you had tracked it down to the very last shred of hope? Now, everything that you just said there, fortunately, somebody has done science with it. Somebody has taken this information. It's been decades ago, back to when I was a very young child, that Dr. Aardsma was asking those questions. Could we take this information about the flood, about the lifespans, about what was going on in this ancient world, and could we answer questions with it? Those questions were asked a long time ago, and there is quite a trail between then and now. And so somebody like John Walton or other authors and researchers and writers, they don't have to start at square one. They can come along, they can check out everything that's been done, they can subject it to their area of expertise. They are welcome to weigh in on it. But what they shouldn't do is write articles on this topic and not even acknowledge it. No persuasive reason has been given. We can't say that anymore. At least under the section that says, could this be literal? Somebody in their article needs to say, one scientist believes it is and has written this book and has this website, and here's his information. We can't just gloss over it, not just because we want to get truth out, but because this is such a huge area of humanitarian possible significance. Absolutely huge. What if it is true? That's the question that these folks who take this kind of an approach need to stop and ask themselves. Is it right to just say, whew, okay,
Right.
they didn't mean for us to look at it like they did not intend for us to think that they actually lived 895 years.
Right. The Bible's trustworthiness is not dependent on people having lived for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. This is how he's ending his article. We don't have to depend on the taking it literally. Whew. This lesson can be applied broadly, he says, when we recognize the rhetorical conventions of the numbers presented in these genealogies. Now listen, we can conclude that they also offer us no information for calculating the date of the flood. Because, we can't find it in history. It didn't really happen.
Once again, water covering the highest mountains, like, okay,
right.
Good thing this is in Genesis 1 through 11 that we somehow push out of reality.
Or calculating the age of the earth. Because, we can all see in the science that it's millions and millions of years old, but the poor Bible So that's what we're doing here. And here's the last words of the article. We simply cannot, quote, do the math.
Right. That's how he ends. So he is negating all chronological significance of these numbers, which is exactly the opposite of Dr. Aardsma, who uses the chronological significance of the numbers to great
and says we can do the math. And look here, folks, it works every single time.
Right. He does say at the end of the article here, the Bible's trustworthiness is not dependent on people having lived for hundreds of years. So somehow he still feels that we have a solid basis for believing the Bible, even though we cannot take it, according to him, at any kind of face value for these long lifespans.
In other words, you don't have to believe fairy tales to believe in God.
Yes.
You don't have to believe fairy tales to believe the Bible. If we were talking about a book that was giving us some sort of apocalyptic language, showing us a real-world event in apocalyptic terms, prophetic language, we all understand that. But we're in a historical narrative here, and what we have presented is documentation. And it's presented that way. It is presented that way, that this is written down documentation of real-world people who really lived. It's hard to put a dividing line there on Genesis 11 and 12 and say that, no, this is and this isn't.
And we can do science with it. Dr. Aardsma isn't in a special category. Any scientist could do science with it if they would take it seriously. And I just, after I read an article like this, it feels fruitless to me. It's not leading anywhere. It doesn't have any future potential. It's just kind of like a dead end. Why did people in the Bible live so long? Well, sorry, but they actually didn't.
It's a dead end in the way we're thinking of it. And again, I want to keep pressing this point in this podcast, because in the way he's thinking of it, it's fruitful in the sense of we're saving people's faith. We are getting rid of this explanation that we have to have of why people live so long, and we know that's embarrassing. But we can save people's faith in God. That's the fruit. They're not seeing it as fruitless like we are, that you are throwing away all this data.
Well, I'm seeing it as fruitless because I've seen the opposite side.
Right, exactly.
I've seen it very closely for a very long time, and I'm seeing the fruitfulness.
Well, let's just get specific about the fruitfulness of it here for a second. Not talking in generalities, not being ambiguous, but specifically, what do we mean as fruitfulness from this data? Okay, here's the simple truth of the matter. What has Dr. Aardsma learned from the data that's in Genesis about the subject of aging specifically? All right, well, first of all, he has learned that our perspective on aging is completely backwards. What seems normal to us is not normal at all in the way God created the world. If Genesis is true, if the accounts are real, then what we think of as a normal lifespan, 70 to 80 years, that's normal. That's what everybody dies at, or around 70 to 80 years. Well, then we are completely wrong that should be considered as normal. And our thought is that the pre-flood lifespans that we're seeing in the Bible, in Genesis, are drastically abnormal. The truth is the pre-flood lifespans are normal. Our human lifespans today are drastically abnormal. We are dying way younger than humans are supposed to die. That is the fundamental explanation of what these genealogical records, these numbers in Genesis, of these people who are living hundreds and hundreds of years, that is what that is showing us.
If you look at our timeline bookmark, it's important to lay these numbers out on a timeline, because then you can get a sense for just how much of human history was covered by these multi-centenarian lifespans. It wasn't just a little blip on the radar back at the time of creation and, whoo, look at this guy who lived so long. No, it was generation after generation, all the way up to the time of Moses. And that actually is 1/3, or maybe more than 1/3 of human history from the time of creation until now. So just getting that perspective alone can start to break through our preconceived ideas that dying at 80 is somehow the way God had always intended for it to be. And then we can realize, look at this, just look at this laid out in this linear fashion. Maybe our experience today isn't how God always intended it to be.
Right. So we're saying here is this is the only window we have, as far as we know, onto lives of people who lived much longer than we do and what ought to be seen as normal. What we experience today is abnormal. So, again, talking about the fruit of this data, the real question to be answered is why. Okay? You have the data. We have the window now. We see, okay, this is what was going on. This is how God made it. This is what people were living back in those times. Why are we now dying so extremely young at less than a tenth of known potential for human lifespan? Well, of course, the answer is this event that is very plainly talked about, documented by this man named Noah in the Bible, the flood. This, what we call Noah's flood, broke the environmental source of 2 vitamins that we no longer have in our diet. This is the data. This is the theory. This is the research that has come out of taking seriously what we find in the Genesis record. So again, we're trying to be specific here. The fruit of this. We are growing sick very quickly. We call it aging. We've called it aging for a long time. Aging is nothing more than a vitamin deficiency disease. We've talked about this in other podcasts. It's in Dr. Arzma's newsletters. We do not have the vitamins in our diet because the flood broke what people were getting in their diets through the water. The good news now is that we don't have to die from this anymore, and again, this is an ongoing research, but there you go. Okay. Yes. Fruit, as you're talking about there, in a very physical,
real way.
Real,
yes,
up-to-date way.
We are, of course, real science, real Bible, real history, real world. And all of those segments are very real, tangible. That's what we're about here at the Biblical Chronologist. And so you can see why that's such a contrast of these 2 approaches. There is such a contrast between the fruitfulness of everything you just described that ends up with the discovery of 2 previously unknown vitamins. That's fruitful. That's something we can hold in our hand, actually, because vitamins can be made in the laboratory as long as you know what the compound is, right? And that's done commonly all the time. Go to your local pharmacy, drugstore, and you will be buying supplements, vitamins off of their shelves that were created in a lab somewhere. Yeah. And
we'll be giving a research update here in just a little bit on these vitamins if you want more information on that.
Correct. But being able to say, you know what, there's something missing off of that shelf. It's called the anti-aging vitamins that were taken out of the environment at the time of Noah's flood. That is extremely fruitful, as opposed to saying, we may never know what was meant by these extremely long lifespans that somebody put down in this ancient book called Genesis. We just might never know.
If we just keep following the template, ignoring the data that's sitting there in front of us and trying to excuse it to be fruitful in another way, trying to save the Bible, as we've already talked about.
Right. It's not fruitful to say that this is just rhetorical information. Please do not try to take it literally. At that point, you have created for yourself a dead end that is completely unnecessary and doesn't lead anybody anywhere. So following right on that, I thought it would be good to just read some direct quotations out of Dr. Arzma's writings over the years because he is so specific. Again, like you said, we don't want to be ambiguous with our audience with what we are talking about with the aging research here. And I thought some of these quotes would probably be enlightening and just, encouraging and give you some food for thought. My research into aging breaks with other contemporary scientific research on aging. research on aging in its attitude toward the lifespan data found in the earliest books of the Bible. These data, because they sport human lifespans of hundreds of years, in some instances approaching nearly 1,000 years, are commonly held to be mythological by contemporary researchers. The attitude toward these data underlying my work is opposite to this. I hold these data to be valid, accurate, invaluable historical observations of actual lifespans of real individuals. And then he says this attitude is neither arbitrary nor religiously biased. The idea that these data are mythological or otherwise concocted, listen to this, cannot be retained by any scientist who has actually worked with them. These biblical data display certain features which are impossible to explain in any other way than that they are valid historical observations. They are intimately associated, later on, he says, with key biblical chronological data. This biblical chronology is checked using radiocarbon dating. It is found to be remarkably accurate.
So trying to save people's faith in the trustworthiness of the Bible, the good news here is this. We don't have to go to these extremes. We don't have to go to these measures to try to help the Bible out.
It's completely unnecessary now.
Here's the good news. We can show that the data in those accounts, in those genealogies, are real. They are true, and you can believe your Bible. You can understand that God is real. You can understand that Jesus is the Son of God, that all these things were, he holds this world together, all the theology that we hold so dearly, because the data's true. And not only that, the data is vitally important to help us save life, it all is a wonderful, wonderful realization that the science, BioLogos, you want to bring together the science and the Bible, the Word and the world. Here it is, like you've never seen it before. We don't have to make excuses for it. It's all real. It's all true. The data is there, and it all comes together beautifully, this Bible science research. So this is all unnecessary, completely unnecessary to be doing this anymore. Trying to save face.
Talking circles around what's plainly in front of our faces. It is astounding to me because from our vantage point here, some of the most precious data in the world, if not the most precious data in the world, in Genesis 5 and Genesis 11. Imagine that. Imagine if you could get the attention of Harvard, the top scientists in the world today, and say, some of the most precious data in the world is contained in Genesis chapter 5 and Genesis chapter 11. Pay attention.
Right.
But it's astounding to me how people who even say they hold the Bible in high esteem are throwing out the data, downplaying it, glossing over it, explaining it away, and even seeing it a little bit as embarrassing to their Christian faith.
Right.
That's not what we want, and that's not fruitful.
Let me just read to you from the back of Dr. Aardsma's book, Aging, Cause, and Cure. Now, there are now books written, all kinds of information, research, significant research has been done on this topic. Listen to this from the back of the latest edition of Aging, Cause, and Cure. In this book, Dr. Gerald Aardsma tackles this problem from an angle unexplored by other scientists today, enabling him to succeed where others have failed. He begins with ancient lifespan data recorded in the Bible and shows how to answer the question, what caused these ancient people to live so much longer than we do today? Well, that's the same question this article asked, right? At the very beginning. And did we get an answer? No, we didn't. And then the last part of this on the back of the book says he then shows how to apply the answer here and now to improve health and dramatically increase longevity. It's an ongoing research. It continues to evolve. It continues to blossom and bloom. And we're going to get into that here in just a minute with our research update. But you talk about a contrast in these two ways of approaching this question of the long lifespans in the Bible.
An incredible amount has been done in the past, what has it been, 9 years now since the first edition of Aging, Cause, and Cure was published. But 9 years into this kind of depth of research work, these types of answers is really not that far in. And for how far we have come and how much we have to offer on this question, it's fruitful, it's leading places. There is more yet to come. And that is such a contrast with a dismissal of the biblical information that really does feel like a dead end, at least to me.
Right.
So as we wrap up this topic, I just had two things that I don't think were said earlier that I wish we had. So we'll say it now as we wrap it up. First of all, yes, the information in Genesis is surprising. It's astounding. But have we not learned by now, with this much human history gone before us, that truth so often is the most surprising thing?
Right.
Whatever you think is the most shocking thing ends up to so often be the truth. What is that saying? Truth is stranger than fiction. So do not dismiss it just on the grounds of it seems pretty incredible, it can't be true. We should know better than that by now. And then the last thing is that one quote I read earlier by Daniel Lowry from that other BioLogos article, that we may never know what these numbers really mean, but we can know what God wants us to take from it. And then he goes into theological things that he thinks God wants us to take from these fantastical numbers. And I just want to point out the simple truth that it's not hard at all to know what God wants us to take from it. If we just take it at face value and then we do the hard work of taking dominion over this creation that God has put us in, taking this amazing insight into the ancient world and doing science with it. It's hard to get to the answer in the bottom of the mystery, but it's not hard to know what does God want us to take from the fact that Kenan lived 910 years, Jared lived 962 years. In fact, that's what he wants us to take from it, is that right there. And let's not be foolish in going off into explanations that are completely jumping the gun of just taking it for the plain sense reading and then going forward with that into all that God will reveal as we seek to understand the ancient past and this creation that he has put us in.
Well, we have a research update to give to you today from the laboratory of Dr. Gerald Aardsma, who is researching this data that is in the book of Genesis. Research update: increased RDI of vitamin MEPiA. Wow, what does that mean?
Yeah, right. That sounds like a bunch of jargon, doesn't it? Increased RDI of vitamin MEPiA. Well, first of all, this is following directly on the discussion that we just had, because this is part of the very practical outflow of the lifespan work and longevity research that Dr. Aardsma has been doing all these years. We, of course, one of our Bible science products that you can purchase here at the BC store is the dropper bottle that contains Dr. Aardsma's anti-aging vitamins. And these are the two newly discovered vitamins that have flowed out of the longevity work. There's two different vitamins in the bottle. And this is what I referenced at the beginning, that we are having to send letters and get our customer base updated because the RDI, which is, what does RDI stand for? Recommended daily intake. How much of this particular compound does your body need? How much can it use? How much is it going to excrete if you take too much of it?
Just like any vitamin.
Correct. And in fact, it's very interesting to note that proper intake levels of different vitamins are still quite up for discussion today in mainstream science. And so, as I mentioned, we're only 9 years in. So, of course, we're still having adjustments here as the theory progresses and Dr. Aardsma's understanding is growing as to how specifically the body is using these two compounds that are the anti-aging vitamins that, of course, were available pre-flood, but we do not get them naturally anymore today. So the second vitamin, the MePiA, that's in the bottle, the methylphosphinic acid, previously was only being provided in the dropper bottle in an extremely small amount, 1 microgram per day for an adult male intake level. Now the theory has progressed to the point of showing that the body most likely needs a lot more than that. So what does that mean? That means that the practical implication is that Dr. Aardsma has increased the concentration of the vitamin drops a lot. Now, with the new bottles and the new concentration, it'll be 125 micrograms per day of that specific vitamin. So that's a big increase.
Big increase, yeah.
Even though it's still a very, very tiny amount. But we want all of our people to know this because your body does stand to benefit quite a bit if it's going to be able to use that much more, and it just hasn't been getting that much, so it didn't have it to be able to send it out to the cells and to the mitochondria to do its job in the body. So that's our most recent step forward with this fruitful longevity research work going on here.
Right. And if you'd like to research it yourself, again, we already mentioned Aging, Cause, and Cure is the book Dr. Aardsma has written. You can order the book. You can download the free PDF on his website if you'd like. If you're interested in how all this happened in Dr. Aardsma's research into the flood, Noah's flood, the event that, according to that data in the book of Genesis, it shows us that was the event that triggered the long lifespans now being suddenly decreased. So all that's available for purchase or for download, and we welcome you to check it out. If you want more information about this change in the change of the vitamins, there's links you can go to. You can check it all out on the biblicalchronologist.org website.
A couple practical notes for those of you that take advantage of this supplement. Don't change the number of drops per day that you're taking. Just get the new bottles and keep taking the same amount of drops per day. Also, if you have old bottles and you think, oh, well, what do I do with these? I just got a shipment and now I can't use this because you're telling me I need to get the new updated concentration. You can send those bottles back and we will exchange them for you free of charge.
October 31st.
Yes.
So if you're listening to it soon after the podcast,
right,
that's available.
This will discontinue October 31st, 2026, which should give everybody plenty of time to get their bottles exchanged. So it's an interesting journey over here of progress and continuing to move towards the goal of unraveling this mystery in God's creation. And I will just say, I did a little study on my own on RDI of vitamins when this got increased to 125 micrograms a day. The multivitamin that I normally take has 21 different vitamins and necessary things in there for the body. Out of those 21, only, only 5 of those vitamins were less than 125 micrograms per day in that multivitamin. So that shows that even with this big increase, it's still a very tiny amount. And it's really interesting to look at your multivitamin label and see some of the vitamins you're getting quite a lot more times per day than other vitamins. And that's because scientists are still working to determine exactly how much is needed and beneficial to the body.
If you want more information, you can go to our show notes. There's a couple of links there. You can read Dr. Aardsma's article on this, as well as look at a notification that we've put up.
I want others to join me in this optimistic outlook that we are still not at the end of the story and that this is a work in progress. And this certainly has the potential to bring about greater health benefits beyond what we have already seen.
All right, it's time for Helen's View, and this month we go again behind the scenes, and Helen has written a little article that is in the form this time of a play, and she calls it a 1-hour masterpiece. We hope you enjoy Helen's View.
A 1-hour masterpiece. Observer. There are 5 actors in the play. The lead is a male, the owner of a business, a husband and father. He carries the central narrative, is always on stage, and has the highest authority on stage. The supporting role is a female, co-owner of the business, a wife and a mother. She has significant time on the stage and advances the subplots, though her life is not the central focus of this specific story. A featured role is played by a male, an employee, and a son. Finally, the bit parts are played by 2 males, employees who are not related to the first 3. The play opens on a beautiful summer day. All 5 actors are on the stage at the same time. Various pieces of machinery are operating on the stage. They are incredibly loud and completely drowning out the voices. It doesn't really matter that the audience can't hear them, because they aren't speaking much anyway. Instead, they are making precise hand signals to each other. As an audience of 1, completely new to this specific play, I have to gather by inference, and from their hand signals, exactly what is being said. The 5 actors are playing in a real-world stage on the front lawn of ARP campus. The year is 2026. Each actor knows their roles beautifully. Each knows their lines and parts very well. The actors have their audience, me, mesmerized from the first scene of the play. The weather this spring in Loda, Illinois has been unusually stormy. Heavy rains, serious thunderstorms with straight-line high winds, and a few touchdown tornadoes close to Loda. One very bad storm caused some large branches to come down from our big, beautiful old maple tree at the front of the ARP campus. One of the largest branches was blown far from the tree. That is how powerful the winds were. Since many of the branches that came down were from the west side of the tree, the maple tree was left seriously unbalanced. We were worried the heavier east side would come down in the next storm, knocking out our power lines. With the tree thus unbalanced, I didn't feel safe mowing under it. We called our local tree service business. We knew them personally because they bring us wood chip mulch for our garden. I left a message, but these folks were drowning in work, taking care of downed trees all over our area after the storms. Later that day, the lady, the co-owner, called me back to set an appointment for the next week. She was polite, even addressing me as ma'am. A few days later, she and her husband arrived to give us an estimate. We asked their opinion. Should we try to save the tree by removing branches from the east side to balance it up, or should the whole thing come down? The man did most of the talking, while his wife stood beside him taking notes. He showed us a large, deep crack along the trunk of the tree. He told us that the tree's days were numbered. It was terminal. Eventually, a strong wind would take it down. But he said we could just trim the east side to balance it, but it wouldn't look very nice. His wife looked up from her notes and made one comment. The tree would look like broccoli. Women think aesthetics. So we made the decision to have the whole tree taken down. I was sad about this as I loved that tree, but safety had to come first. To save the cost of hauling, we decided to keep the wood. We have sold firewood in the past and had all the equipment for it. I had asked if they would mind moving the logs to the back near our barn, but they explained that would cost extra. Wherever the wood dropped is where it would stay. That meant we would have to take our tractor out and haul it back ourselves, another job to add to our never-ending list. Right from the start, I was impressed with the husband and wife dynamic. They were polite and respectful to us and to each other. They left saying that would be about a month and a half before they could return to take the tree down because of their backlog. Yet, just 2 days later, she called and said they were coming to take the tree down. Her efficiency and communication skills were obvious, a very smart businesswoman. Many fallen trees were inaccessible, surrounded by mud after the storms. Ours was next to our paved driveway. It wasn't long before I heard the buzzing sound of chainsaws. It was exactly 11:15 a.m. The play was about to begin. I took my seat in the front row. The plot? How long would it take to get the massive tree down? Their plot? The exact same thing, because time is money. Act 1, Scene 1. The man is in a bucket on an aerial lift, quickly taking down branches. He is clearly in the lead role. No screaming at the others over the loud machinery, but delivering obvious hand motions to everyone below. The woman is quickly scooting around on a skid steer, operating a big claw, grabbing several massive branches at a time and heading over to the wood chipper machine. She is magnificent in her supportive role. The son is lifting heavy branches, feeding them straight into the roaring chipper, which spews its chips into a covered dump truck. The other two guys are using chainsaws to chop up the larger limbs before throwing them into the shredder. I am completely hooked and mesmerized. I refuse to leave my seat to get popcorn or even use the restroom. The husband is fully in charge, using hand motions to direct everyone, including his wife. But there is no tension between them. Each has a role, and each knows exactly what to do next. They have clearly practiced thousands of hours for this play. No one is standing around watching. If there is a brief 3-second pause while waiting for the next set of limbs, the workers are picking up stray sticks and small branches, throwing them into the chipper. When the husband gives a hand motion, the workers, including his wife and son, literally run from place to place. They are running, carrying chainsaws and other tools where they are needed. After about 40 minutes, the tree is pretty much down and the covered dump truck is completely full of chips. The wife immediately drives it to our mulch pile at the back of our property. While she is gone, instead of everyone resting, the son steps up, takes over the skid steer, and begins loading the remaining branches onto the back of a large flatbed truck. I am surprised by this shift. I'm thinking they will want to chip those branches. Eventually, I figure out that it is simply more efficient to load the flatbed truck while the chipper is not available. I am struck by a simple truth. People on the sidelines don't actually know what is best. The leader is operating with a level of experience and foresight which is hidden from our view, even from the front row. It is neat to watch the leader cut down the big stump with his chainsaw. I'm thinking for sure the chainsaw will never manage to do it. But after several minutes of cutting, it is accomplished. The remaining stump gets knocked over using the skid steer. When the woman returns from dumping the wood chips, she hops back on the skid steer and begins to move the massive pieces of remaining wood entirely off the lawn, stacking them neatly out of the way beside our driveway. They didn't have to do this. They told me explicitly that where the wood fell, it would stay. They went the extra mile to please the customer. I was very happy. This meant we could deal with moving the wood pile at a later date when our garden wasn't consuming so much of our time. There is no job too lowly for the boss, his wife, or the son. Every one of them grabs rakes and blowers, scouring the grass until every single scrap of leaf and twig is gone. All this took exactly 1 hour. You would never know that a massive maple tree had just been erased from our front yard. Backstage. After the play, I have a brief moment to chat with the wife, though it isn't long, as she is literally on the run. I asked her about the reality of working with her husband all day, every day. She smiles and says, "I love my husband, and I like being with him as much as I can. And I love being with our son. He will soon be off to college and on with his own life. So time together is precious." How incredibly refreshing. She is clearly talented, intelligent, highly knowledgeable, and very capable. She is a vital part of the team. Her husband is clearly in charge, but she doesn't feel threatened, lessened, or minimized by her role. She performs it joyfully and happily. And the son? He is clearly not thinking, "My dad's the boss, so treat me right." He takes the same submissive, hard-working role as the laborers who aren't even related to the family. Of course, the son has a great example in his mother and how she performs her role. This is the magic I observed. It is an absolute win-win for all of the actors. Thoughts after the play ended. I have pondered the entire event for quite a few days. Every time it crosses my mind, it makes me smile. How refreshing it was to see this play when so many other plays I have seen in this life displayed unfulfilled, unhappy family members in total chaos. No leaders, no followers. A total mixed-up mess. Families, businesses, churches, and governments all succeed when everyone has a specific role to play and when every member knows they are needed, important, and worthy. Someone has to be in charge, and others have to follow. If no one is in charge, it is chaos and a lose-lose for everyone. I love husband and wife teams. I speak from the personal experience of almost 52 years of marriage and working together to raise our family of 10 children and later in Christian ministry for over 30 years. The husband and wife team is the most efficient business model in existence when both members play their roles properly and well. Staff meetings can happen at a moment's notice over breakfast. Decisions can be made and problems solved quickly and efficiently. Why does this model work so well? Because it is a design thought through by God long before time itself began. The world is our audience. We step out onto the grass every single day, acting out our roles in front of family, neighbors, co-workers, and strangers. The world is watching us. The question we must answer when our play ends is this: did they see the chaos of the world, or did they see the beautiful, mesmerizing order and cooperation of the kingdom of God? Be sure to check out the photos for Helen's view, since there are quite a few that go right along with this story.
Well, here at the BC Messenger, real science, real Bible, real history, and real world, our goal is to offer you content filled with fresh ideas, meaning, challenging thoughts, taking a high view of both the Bible and the literature that's in the Bible and the records that are given to us, as well as a high view of the science. This is how we grow as individuals. This is how the world changes for the better. We are so glad that you're along with us each month, and we thank you for joining us this month. We will see you again next month in September.
It's always a pleasure, and thanks for letting us speak into your world once a month. We'll see you next time.